It is 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. And, well, a strange one to start with this morning. As we established yesterday, the notion of talking of nothing else during the entire period of mourning has been considered and declined. We will, of course, be turning our attentions a little later back to Ukraine, where events are unfolding in a fascinating fashion, although yesterday's guest reminding us of some of the horrors that will emerge as the Russians retreat was very important. The conversation we had about protesters at royal gatherings has proved rather prescient, hasn't it? That story has taken off since. I wasn't sure it would. I did wonder whether people would sort of look the other way or observe a period of decorum and but the footage, we live in a social media age, and when those clips go viral, the big beasts of traditional media have to follow. We may return to that a little later today, although I have to tell you, I am drawn inexorably to the employment figures and the fascinating question of why so many people are just withdrawing from the workforce before retirement age. And it's a luxury that I didn't think many people could afford. So we possibly will return to that question as well a little later today. But I'm going to begin with a strange one. Strange in the sense of it's well, I don't know about you, but if I had to describe, if I had to come up with a phrase or a sentence to describe the overall sense that I personally have at the moment, it would be close to saying, well, it doesn't matter, but it does. Or, indeed, it matters, but it doesn't. It's a dissonant position in which to find yourself. In the great scheme of things, an awful lot of the stuff upon which we are focusing is not important. By most objective measures, the unfolding story of the shooting of Chris Cabba in London last Monday night is a much bigger story than the one we're about to discuss first, although for anyone not aware, we had a very long and heated conversation about that yesterday. I can tell you that since that conversation, I'm not suggesting for a minute there's a link, but just chronologically, since that conversation, the officer who shot Chris Cabba dead has been suspended, and the homicide investigation continues. But the notion of something matters but doesn't matter seems to me to hang over the whole week in a way, in terms not of the funeral itself or the passing of the Queen herself. Obviously, that's of enormous importance, constitutional, emotional, all manner of things. But all the other stuff we're talking about. I went to Green Park last night. The whole family traipsed into town to have a look at the floral tributes and just sort of absorb some of the atmosphere. Mrs. O'Brien is reporting on events for Australian television, which she does it very occasionally on matters of great constitutional import. And it was odd. I mean, but also strangely moving, but also it matters, but it doesn't matter. I find it... Here's a perfect example of how contradictory I'm being, is that I was there, but I was wondering why people were there. That's it, isn't it? That's the tweet, as they say. I was there because it sort of felt like something like witnessing history, like having a seat at the moment of importance, and yet at the same time I was wondering why people were there. Quite a pleasant atmosphere, the sort of slow procession around Green Park and up the Mall and around the outskirts of the palace and then back again, carefully corralled, carefully marshalled. I confess I'm a little bit worried about how the capital is going to cope with the sort of numbers that are being mooted as heading this way in the next few days. That's something else we might look at a little bit today. But there you go. Sometimes I think an action speaks louder than words, doesn't it? So I think the best way I can convey to you what I mean when I say it matters but it doesn't matter is the fact that I was there with thousands of other people, making my way past fields, acres of floral tributes, drinking in moments, while also thinking on occasion, my thoughts were punctuated by the question of why am I here? Why? What is everybody doing? Why are we all here? And I don't know the answer to that question. And I'm not going to ask you either yet, because we're human beings and we can't provide a fully rational analysis of everything we feel or everything we do. And that's why, loosely speaking, we're not robots. But here's a rather interesting illustration of royal journalism in this country. There's a woman, I don't know if you're familiar with her, called Angela Levin, who styles herself as a royal biographer. She's written books. One book about Prince Harry. I don't think it was a collaboration or something that was authorised or done with his permission. My apologies if I'm wrong. But she's sort of essayed this into being one of those faces that pops up on television and radio when you need to book a, quote, expert, end quote. And I noticed this morning she's retweeted a strange American woman claiming that the outline, a small rectangular outline below around the waistband of Meghan Markle's dress yesterday, is evidence that she's a spy who is carrying a recording device designed to surreptitiously spy on other members of the royal family. That's someone who actually gets booked by broadcasters, who's sharing that sort of bilge. And I mention it partly because I think people like that should be held to account, but also because it's an illustration of how bonkers coverage of that particular couple has become. Of Harry and Meghan, the way in which their every action is reported is truly ridiculous and deeply unpleasant and often, if not always, racist in its inception. And that is why I find myself continuously befuddled by his uncle's continuing presence in the very forefront of the family. Now, I don't know what the answer would be to the question of how do you cope with the fact that one of the sons of the late Queen gave several $1 million to a woman who accused him of rape. I don't know what the decorum would be. I don't know what etiquette would demand. I don't know what tradition would dictate. But I do know this. If you're going to get into trouble for asking that question or pointing it out, then something really grim and ugly is unfolding right under our noses. And the lad in Scotland who got sort of strong-armed, he got hauled out of the crowd by a member of the public, uncomfortable with questions being asked and points being made about reality, about facts. Again, that clash of the stuff you can get your head around and the stuff that you can't. If I'd said to you, I don't know, a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if I'd said to you that you were going to have a man who'd given several £1 million to a woman who accused him of rape in order to make the court case go away or to make the investigations, the legal proceedings disappear, and he's still front and centre at a time like this, you probably would have been a little bit surprised, I think. I think I would have been, and yet, obviously, you can't, can you? You can't ban someone from mourning their own mother because of their record, however ugly and unpleasant or questionable it may be. And then you come to Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, as he remains, who has been told that he has to dress in a suit at ceremonial events. Have we got the bit from Camp Bastion? Have we got that clip? There's you'll have seen it probably, an astonishing episode in royal journalism when Prince Harry is, I think, in Afghanistan on a base, and an alarm goes off in the middle of an interview. And as cool and as casually as you like, he removes his microphone and runs towards battle, potentially. His uncle Andrew, of course, was also a helicopter pilot in the Falklands, so were it not for the £12 million worth of scandal that haunts his every step, there would be a parallel to make. But the two stories I'll draw your attention to first this morning, or second actually, the first story I've drawn your attention to, I suppose, is that ludicrous so-called royal commentator, Angela Levin, who feels that she can spit as much bile as she pleases at Harry and Meghan and avoid all manner of, or all form of scrutiny herself, which is a fairly typical distillation of the kind of people that like to use snowflake as an insult, isn't it? But here's the apparently contrasting stories. They're not, as it turns out, as contrasting as the headlines suggest. The Daily Telegraph reports, Harry stripped of uniform, but not Andrew. It turns out there is one dispensation. He will be permitted to wear it on one occasion. He can wear his uniform at the vigil in Westminster Hall as a final mark of respect for his mother. That is expected to be the full dress uniform of a Vice Admiral of the Navy, which is the only military rank he still holds. The Duke of Sussex, or Prince Harry, as he is more informally known, has been denied the right to wear a military uniform at any events leading up to it. And I just think that's unfair. I think surely, regardless of how curdled your consciousness has become as the efforts of right-wing newspapers in this country to persuade you that Harry and Meghan are somehow undeserving of your support and affection, the fellow who's paid £12 million to a woman who accused him of rape gets to wear a uniform, and the lad whose gravest offence is falling in love with a woman of colour is denied it. I can't get my head around that. And it's one of King Charles's first decisions, remember. There was a right old brouhaha when Andrew wanted to wear the full regalia at the funeral of his father. It's an odd thing that I don't think you can begin to understand unless you're right in the middle of that culture and even perhaps that family. Why would you want to wear a uniform that denotes a rank you never achieved through service, for example? But if we are to bend the knee towards tradition in this way, what possible rationale can there be for not letting Prince Harry wear a military uniform at his grandma's funeral? If he wants to. I mean, that's the way the story is reported, that he has been forbidden from doing so. I'd like to know what ex-forces think about that. You know, I don't see that Prince Harry has brought the military into any form of disrepute in the way that Prince Andrew measurably has. And for one of them to be allowed to wear a uniform at one ceremony and the other one not, I'll tell you what the word I want is: spiteful. That just looks spiteful to me. I could be wrong. I hope I am. It is the curse, I guess, of the royal family that in return for the unparalleled privilege they enjoy, they have to endure hoi polloi like us, picking over every dot and comma of their existences. But I think this one merits a little bit of attention from us subjects, us mere subjects. How can the fella who's paid off a rape accusation be afforded the respect of a military uniform, while the fella who's done nothing wrong is not, except upset right-wing media in this country? And, of course, the forelock tuggers and the cap doffers who have allowed themselves to be gaslit and groomed by right-wing media for the last 20 years, or in the case of this couple, the last 5 or 6. I'll open up the phone lines now. That's the question. And you know, give me the technical answers as well if you want. But if there's a dispensation for Andrew, I don't think the technical answers work. If it's a nod and a wink from your brother that lets you wear it at the vigil, then why can't your son wear it at the funeral? Who's brought the military into disrepute? Who has been more respectful? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. And let's keep it simple. Do you think that Prince Harry should be invited by his father to wear a uniform at his grandma's funeral? 0345 6060 973. I know when I say what I'm about to say to you, you start a clock to count the seconds until I actually contradict myself or undermine my own ambitions. But today I really don't want to have a row about it. I really don't want to have a set to. I think that would be inappropriate. Having a respectful, hopefully informed, and perhaps occasionally emotional conversation about it is absolutely fine. But if you're looking for a scrap, I think you've come to the wrong place, and I will do my level best. With the caveat that I'm not sure I've ever managed it before, but I will do my level best to keep things sweet. Why not? I mean, we don't know what would be in the mind of Her Majesty, but the idea that he's been forbidden, the one whose military service is, I think, the most impressive, the most exceptional, is the one that's not allowed to wear a uniform, while his brother will look like, you know, the star of a Gilbert and Sullivan opera. I don't think that's right. I just don't think it's fair, that's all. 10:17 is the time. Your thoughts after this. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. Harry's stripped of uniform, but not Andrew. Military uniforms banned for Andrew and Harry. A hop there from the Telegraph to the Mail. They're both right. The Mail doesn't seem to have been afforded the scoop that Andrew will be allowed to wear his at the vigil, but not, I think, at the funeral. It just seems to me very unfair on Harry. One word of warning, a word of caution from somebody formerly of Fleet Street, just suggesting to me that the Queen may have left wishes for her funeral. So, we won't ever be fully appraised of all of the facts, but it does, my correspondent allows, look like a misstep by Charles, who had nothing to lose by allowing his son to wear it. I agree with that bit. Well, I'm also conscious of the fact that it may have been the Queen's wish that Harry didn't wear a uniform, but it seems very unlikely. I will find you that footage of him. And I don't know whether it's going to work on the radio. It's very powerful visually, but I'd like to listen to it anyway. 10:21 is the time. Alex is in Shrewsbury. Alex, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James.
Hello,
long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well done.
Obviously. Okay, so I served in the Army for 22 years. I never served with Harry, but I do know guys that did, and they have nothing but the utmost respect for what he did. And to be honest, I've nothing but the utmost respect for Andrew's military service during the Falklands. He definitely acquitted himself very well.
Yes.
But, regarding the accusations that were made against him and the fact that he's paid a large sum of money to make those accusations go away. And as you said, all Harry seems to have done is married a woman of colour.
Yeah.
And I think it's shocking that he's not allowed to wear the uniform.
I know you only...
He absolutely deserves that right to do so.
You wouldn't be allowed to, would you, if you weren't in the forces anymore? You wouldn't be...
No. People that wear uniforms that never had military service are known as Waltz, as I'm sure you're well aware.
Short for Walter Mitty. No, I know that. And I don't think you're accusing William of being a Walt or anything like that. The point is that the rules that apply to people like you don't apply to the royal family, so it's a little bit disingenuous to pick one rule that would apply to you and then behave as if it somehow applies to Harry. That was kind of what I was driving at.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you only speak for yourself, but do you think that your position would be quite widely held among comrades, past and present?
I think so, actually. I think from guys, I've been at the army some time now, but I still talk to some of my old service mates, and I think absolutely they would think Harry should be allowed to wear the uniform.
He was in Afghanistan, wasn't he? I mean, there's no getting away from that simple fact.
You pointed out that clip of him being interviewed. The alarm goes off, and away he goes to face,
who knows what?
Who knows what?
In an Apache, of course, as well.
And it was obviously the mainstream media who made it well known that they would let people know if he was serving that stopped him doing more.
There is a 9-minute clip around which I don't think gets anything like the coverage that a lot of the nonsense that surrounds these two gets, of him talking in depth about what they've been through and the baptism of fire, the penny drop moment he had, and within days of it being announced that he was seeing Meghan Markle, people started talking about the DNA, the royal DNA being thickened by her exotic blood, and a headline saying she's straight out of Compton. I mean, it really merits revisiting. I'm tempted to play you the whole thing, actually, but the other bit of it that was relevant was his really deep loathing of the Fourth Estate, of the media. Partly, born long before he met Meghan. Obviously, the treatment of his mother weighs heavily on him, but also he feels that they almost robbed him, as Alex alludes to there, of his military career. The idea that he couldn't stay there because the media couldn't be trusted not to sort of give away details of what he might have been up to. There's a very powerful clip where he addresses that head on. I think if I live to be 212, I'll never fully understand the vitriol directed at him and his wife, because, of course, some of us will never fully understand the idea of basing an opinion on skin colour rather than on more important matters. Thank you, Alex. Al's in Plymouth. Al, what do you reckon?
Yeah, hi, James. You asked for people to keep it simple, so I will. I don't think this is related to skin colour. I don't think this is related to military service. I'm ex-forces myself. I left some 3 months ago after a number of years in the Navy. I am no longer entitled to wear my naval uniform. Okay?
Yes.
Neither is Prince Harry from his service, neither is Prince Andrew from his. Now, the difference is that Prince Andrew, I'm assuming, will be entitled. You mentioned the naval uniform, vice admiral or whatever.
He lost his honorary positions except vice admiral of the Royal Navy. That's the only military rank which he still holds. Although, I mean,
so that is the only uniform he's allowed to wear.
That is the technical explanation. But I need to remind you that he's not allowed to wear it at other events. So these decisions are not being made according to protocol or technicalities. They're being made according to the King's whim.
Okay, but that is a question whether, he holds that rank, honorary, and therefore would be entitled to wear the uniform if the King chose.
But he's not. Yeah, if the King chose. So the King has said you can't wear it at the funeral, so he could say to his son, you can.
Okay, but in Harry's case, he has no honorary title, so he's not entitled to wear the uniform which he earned and served the Queen in,
yes,
as I'm not entitled to anymore. But he's given up his, I don't know if he was a commandant of the Royal Marines, but a number of various positions and honorary positions he gave up.
And that is...
So he's got no uniform to wear.
And that, in a nutshell, is, if you like, the technical argument or the red tape argument or the bureau... Well, that's what our heads tell us, Al. We understand that. What does your heart tell you?
My heart tells me, actually, my heart tells me that in the case of Prince Harry, that's right. He gave up.
So setting aside, the man who gave 12, or whose mother gave £12 million to a woman who accused them of rape, gets to wear his uniform, and a man who we all saw running towards his Apache, No, hang on. I mean, you need to hear the question before you can answer it. The man running towards the Apache helicopter in Afghanistan just doesn't, because, them's the breaks.
The answer to your previous question was, yes, I don't think that Prince Harry is entitled to, because he is no longer serving and he's no longer honorary. The answer to
those aren't emotional. That's why I asked you how you feel about it, rather than the thought process.
The answer is, for the other one,
yes,
I feel that he should not be entitled to wear that uniform.
Yeah.
But that is not for me to say.
No, and to be fair, in a way, nor is the first bit. Although the collision of red tape and protocol means that you are absolutely justified in the explanation of why Harry won't be wearing anything. It is the juxtaposition. It's why we're having the conversation in the context of both of them rather than in isolation. Because in isolation, I think it is almost an open and shut case. But if the King's whim can allow a brother to wear a uniform at one ceremony, I would believe that there wouldn't be any trouble. Or, what trouble can you get into when you're the King? Let's hope we never find out. But if he decided that Harry was allowed to wear his uniform at his grandma's funeral, that to me would be welcome, not just permissible, but welcome. Thank you, Al. 29 minutes after 10 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Lots of other stories around, obviously, although you'll understand why this week, at least, the focus is a little different from any other time in living memory. Consumers are now paying a record £571 more on average for their groceries than last year. Aldi, the figures looking at supermarkets and grocery prices also show that Aldi has become Britain's fourth largest supermarket for the first time, a reflection perhaps of people shopping more and more at the supermarkets that have a reputation for slightly lower prices than some of their rivals. I have to remind you, because we live here, that Liz Truss recently said she thinks it's perfectly fair that the rich will benefit a lot more from her current plans to tackle the cost of living crisis than the poor will. Yeah. I can also tell you that one think tank reports today, and it's a proper think tank that reveals its funding, the Resolution Foundation, not the kind of quotes think tank end quotes whose alumni get jobs in Downing Street, that the rich are to get twice as much cost of living support than poorer households in crunching the numbers, looking at the plans, the national insurance cuts and limits to energy bills. Richer homes will get £4,700 in 2023 compared to £2,200 for the poorest. We might try and make some sense of that a little later in the programme. First, though, Holly Harris is here with your headlines. It is 10:34. The problem isn't really who wears what uniform, James. This is from Francis. But actually, why has disgraced Prince Andrew still got any honorary military titles? Julian Suffolk asks, I wonder what the athletes at the amazing Invictus Games would make of all this. And Jim says he runs towards an Apache gunship, a flying death machine. I'm an ex-squaddy, and you would see the Afghans say bye when the Apache came over the horizon. Harry, one of the most rich and privileged boys in the world, has killed hundreds of poor Afghan people with the most expensive piece of equipment available. I read out the rhetoric, Jim, but I think statistically you're talking absolute twaddle. Apaches may indeed have been responsible for casualties on that level, but the notion that Prince Harry himself killed hundreds of people while on active service is, I just think, not accurate. But, it was a war, wasn't it? And both sides are trying to harm each other. I'm sorry that your service has left you feeling the way that it's left you. I respect that completely. I always think of Harry Patch and the comments about the First World War, but just in the interest of statistical accuracy, the facts are a little different to what you reflect. 10:35 is the time, and I play you that little clip now of him running from a camp which could and would have been under routine threat, constant threat from Taliban attacks in the event of an alarm going off, because I find it astonishing that this fellow will be the only member of the entire royal family, the direct family, that won't wear a military uniform at any of the ceremonies set to unfold in the coming week.
He seemed relaxed, his guard down, but when the call came, his duty was very clear to see.
It wasn't done in the wrong way, but it was just...
He's gone. That's it. They didn't even explain. Boom, alarm, he's off. And he's the one that's not allowed to wear a uniform. I just think it's unfair and possibly even spiteful. Certainly a bit of a misstep, even with the rigmarole and the protocol supporting elements of the decision. I find that falls apart when you reflect upon the fact that his Uncle Andrew still has not only an honorary military title, but apparently permission to wear his uniform at the Westminster Vigil. 10:36 is the time. Couple of phone lines free now. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Jim's in Croydon. Jim, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James.
Hello, Jim.
I've been enjoying your show, so thank you for that. You're
welcome.
Kept me just the right side of bonkers since working from home became fashionable.
Fantastic. I'll take that as a win.
I actually watched, I'm not a royalist at all, so if I had my way, these conversations wouldn't even be happening. But that aside, I did actually watch the Helen Mirren Queen movie last night. I don't know whether you've seen it. It's the period where
I have,
Princess
yes,
Diana
actually.
was.
Again, I don't know why. It wouldn't ordinarily be my top of my Netflix selection,
No.
but it did. I did watch that one. It was rather good. A brilliant performance by her, as you'd expect.
By all of them, actually.
Yes.
It was a good movie. But I was watching that, so what I'm about to say is probably somewhat influenced by the movie yesterday.
Oh, thank God you didn't watch Guardians of the Galaxy.
Exactly, yes. But the thing that I took from that is that this duty first, the family and duty first.
Yes.
And the whole movie was sort of around that particular notion. And of course, the second point of the movie was that they did not get it right. So this may be where Charles is coming from. My first thoughts when you mentioned this is that Prince Andrew is in need of rehabilitation. And Prince Harry is still somewhat perhaps in need of punishment. Just in the way
that if you were coming at it cold and you were looking at what was being done in the coming days and looking at this specific element of that issue, you would think that one of these people was being handed some form of olive branch while the other one wasn't. Although I think it's important to keep Al's words in mind about the strict protocol-based technicalities of it all. For the rest of us who perhaps think, maybe wrongly, that the king can and has treated one with a lot more perhaps sympathy than the other, oddly, then it's the fella who paid out eye-watering sum of money to a woman who'd accused him of sexual abuse, who's getting the olive branch, and the lad who hasn't is not.
Yes, but of course Prince Andrew's indiscretions, if we can call them that.
No, we can't. We call them allegations, but they were allegations of much, much more than indiscretions. I know you know that, and being on the radio can, go on, carry on.
But he has never spoken out against the family.
No, that's true.
And the perception, of course, is that Prince Harry and his wife have. So, I mean, that was my first thought.
Yeah. And that would explain what you perceive as this imbalance in treatment. I don't know if they're trying to rehabilitate Andrew. I get the impression that with the loss of his mum, his champion or his defender has gone, and that Charles and William in particular, and I get all of this from reading the newspapers, just like all the people on the telly who describe them as royal experts. Hardly any of them have any particular insights or contacts. They're just very good at blustering confidently in front of a camera. But the impression I get from a lot of the coverage is that William is pretty clear that there is no way back for Andrew. So this is almost like a final dispensation rather than a rehabilitative episode.
Did I read somewhere last week that is it Beatrice and Eugene had already approached Prince Charles with a request for finding a role for Andrew?
I don't know about that. I know that one of the daughters gets a sort of promotion to being able to stand in at events or to do some ribbon cutting. I don't know about that, and it's possible you're following it more closely than I am, but I can't. I mean, that just isn't going to happen. I will eat my tricorn hat, Jim, if they try and reintroduce Andrew into the sort of formal fold of performing royals. I just don't see that happening. I think they're going to slim it down more than it has been done so already. Let's be clear about this. In February, the Duke paid around £12 million. Many people believe the money probably came from his mum anyway, to settle a civil case with his accuser, Virginia Roberts Giuffre. After several months of legal wrangling and mudslinging, he has always denied any wrongdoing, but the allegations were statutory rape. She was an underage girl at the time of the encounters, not the alleged encounters. Encounters occurred, but what occurred during those encounters remains the subject of allegations. There's also the sort of week-long goodbye party that he had with Jeffrey Epstein, which is just frankly unbelievable. Never would the British class system be as obtuse as it is at a time like this. Imagine if it was a television presenter or a sports star that had been caught up in precisely this sort of scandal. The idea that he's all right. We'll let him back on Dave. We'll give him a gig. We'll let him have a run out in a veterans tournament. It just wouldn't happen. But here it is. The royal family still affording a ceremonial role, a ceremonial honour to Andrew that is being denied to Prince Harry. Jim, thank you. You got any other film recommendations? Well, no, he's gone. 10:42 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Just asking this question, really. How can it be fair for Andrew to wear a uniform at one of the ceremonies while Harry has been forbidden from wearing his at any, or not even his, because as Al reminded us, you sort of technically hand it in when you finish. But, I mean, the king, this is what I mean by it matters, but it doesn't matter. There is something a little bit bizarre about the brocade and the medals. And, I mean, it harks back to a time when kings would lead their soldiers into war, into battle, doesn't it? It's Henry V at Agincourt. It harks back to a time. Or even Richard III at Bosworth Field, although that ended badly. It harks back to a time when kings were commanders-in-chief literally and actually. And they haven't been for centuries. I wouldn't hazard a guess at who was the last royal to actually lead troops into battle. I suppose Rupert of the Rhine had a go. Charles I probably did, didn't he? Charles I would have been at Worcester? Yeah, of course he was. He hid in a tree while he was running away. So post Cromwell probably. Which monarch would actually have? I don't know. I haven't got the history. as the late Peter Cook almost said. But the medals and the brocade, the epaulets, the hats, for people who've never really done a day's military service, while the man who has won't be wearing anything. I just find it utterly, utterly bizarre. I understand it. You've explained the bits I didn't understand. You've shared but it's just unbelievable. Dave is the second person to point out we don't know that he actually wants to wear it, which is, if I was a quotes royal expert end quotes popping up on American TV or a breakfast television sofa, I would now give you the impression that I know for certain that Harry wants to wear. Oh no, my sources tell me, they would say. My sources tell me that Harry is very upset that he's there. They haven't got a Scooby-Doo. They haven't got a clue. Certainly not where Harry and Meghan are concerned. The average British tabloid journalist, they'd rather put pins in their eyes than share anything with the average Brit. But you don't admit that if you're getting 50 quid for a quick hit on a breakfast television sofa, do you? So you'd be like, well, Harry is very upset about this. And while he remains respectful of his late grandmother's memory, he does feel that as by far the most experienced military man in the royal family, there is something somewhat anomalous about the fact that he'll be the only one not permitted to wear any form of military uniform. It's 10:45. 10:48 is the time. The only member of the the member of the royal family with the most military experience is not allowed to wear a uniform. The member of the royal family with the second most military experience is, but he recently gave £12 million to a woman who'd accused him of rape, while the members of the royal family with next to no military experience, including Prince Edward, who I'm sure is a lovely bloke, but who quit the Marines, and listen, for the record, I wouldn't last 10 minutes. I did the assault course at Sandhurst once. Did I ever tell you about this? Oh, yes. I did the assault course at Sandhurst once, the obstacle course. They don't call it an obstacle course, do they? That's it's a knockout. They call it which the Royals have also done. What a time to be alive. And I wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes on the basic officer training at Sandhurst, never mind the much more rigorous Marine training. So I'm not criticising him for that by any stretch of the imagination. I am, however, pointing out that he knocked it on the head after a few minutes, a few days, a few weeks. He didn't complete his training. But he's going to be in full military regalia when Harry isn't. I just think it's unfair. And listen, the thing is, there's no point having a mind if you never change it. There's no point having traditions if you never change it. We don't send kids up chimneys anymore. We've progressed. We've moved on. This is a throwback to the days when kings and occasionally queens would lead their own troops into battle. Cry God for England, Harry and St. George. Well, not Harry, unfortunately, in the 21st century, because he's the only one that's not allowed to wear the full bib and tucker. 10:50 is the time. Amar is in Streatham. Amar, what do you make of all this? I was about to make a comment about how refreshing it is to hear. Oh, here she is, finally.
I wanted to clear up, James, what you said earlier.
Oh. Well, let's get your phone line sorted first. I don't know whether you've got... I think you may have put me on speaker or you've got the radio on in the background. So we'll just fix that and get you straight back. Craig's in Hull. Craig, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah, just listening to your show earlier on,
yeah.
And I think Harry had one of the most privileged guys in the world. He'd relinquished all his honorary titles and all the rest of it. Walked away from privilege. He then subsequently slated his family. I
don't know that he slated his family. He shared his thoughts on events that were being reported in this country from the most skewed and biased perspective by a media that remains entirely in thrall to his grandma and to a lesser extent his brother. He put his side of a story that was being told about him by everybody with the word royal in their job title in the British media, mate. So there's a little bit of balance needed there.
There is, but at the same time, we all have family fallouts, and there's a time and a place, and certain things should be kept behind closed doors.
And they did. And it was when the failure to protect his wife from abuses being inflicted upon her by the British media was decided upon as a deliberate policy by his brother that he decided it was time to step out from behind the closed doors. We could do this all day if you want.
Yeah, okay, but that aside, he decided to relinquish all his honorary titles.
But it was a condition. It was a condition of his stepping back from royal duties. I don't want to question the late Queen's judgment, but if I had been the late Queen, I'd have let him keep one or two. Because here's the point, Craig, that you're going to have to deal with next. If Prince Andrew's allowed to keep one, why wasn't he?
No, definitely not. I don't think why he should be able to keep any.
Well, that's intrinsic to the question we're asking today. How can one of them be getting the nod and the other one be getting the no?
Well, I didn't realise Andrew was. He was allegedly stripped of all of his titles.
Nope, he's still a Vice Admiral of the Royal Navy.
Well, I agree on that. He shouldn't. I feel that both of them shouldn't be wearing the uniform. They're both. He should have been stripped of all of his titles, and why he managed to keep one. Harry walked away from all of his titles. I served myself in Afghanistan, and I would love to be part of the state funeral to one of Her late Majesty. But there's no way. I'm not entitled to wear my uniform as I, now being medically discharged.
Why is that, Craig? Do you know what is the rationale for it? Is it?
Because you are now a civilian. You're not a serving soldier anymore. So at that point,
But none of the royal family are serving soldiers anymore, and they'll all be wearing.
They're honorary ranks, aren't they? So as an honorary rank, you can wear a uniform. If I was an honorary colonel of my regiment or any other regiment, you are entitled then to wear a uniform. That's not right,
is it? That's a bit odd, frankly.
Well, it is odd. I guess it's one of those several thousand-year-old traditions that we've still kept. But
it just is, isn't it?
Yeah,
it just is. I mean, Harry did fight for his country. So did you. Yep. The only bit I'm uncomfortable with, from what you've said, is the idea that Harry deciding for whatever reasons that he wanted to step back from the circus of control. He wanted to be in control of his own destiny. He didn't want to live in purdah or hide away for the rest of his life. He can't help being a public figure. He's going to be a public figure to the day he dies, whether he likes it or not. Is in any way comparable to the reasons why his uncle has lost most of his military titles. I mean, what I see there is one man in disgrace and another man being, depending on your perspective, quite courageous. It takes an awful lot to walk away from that sort of tradition. As we've seen, the punishments have been severe.
It is, but that was a choice he made. He could have still been part of the taking on royal duties and the like, but he decided to walk away from all of that. For whatever reason.
Yeah. So, no, I hear you. Let me ask you this then. Let me ask you this: if you were in charge, would you let Harry wear his uniform at his grandma's funeral? Given that the parallel with yourself doesn't quite work because all of his relatives will be, and none of them have put in a shift like he's put in service.
No, I don't.
Fair enough.
I don't.
I respect that.
And likewise, I don't think Andrew should be wearing one.
You've done it again. It's the likewise that upsets me, because the two, it's like chalk and cheese. I completely respect you saying I don't think he should be allowed to. But the likewise, because Harry is not disgraced. So it's not likewise.
No, he's not. Okay, so his uncle also should wear a uniform.
There we go. I'll meet you on the also, will I? As long as we wave goodbye to the likewise.
Okay, then, James.
You look after yourself, Craig, and thank you for your service as well. If it's appropriate for me to say that, I always like to. 10:55 is the time. Should we give Amar another go? Where were we, Amar?
Hi, James. Can you hear me now?
That's better. Go on.
So what I wanted to correct is, first of all, Prince Andrew didn't pay $12 million. The taxpayer paid $12 million for his alleged whatever he did.
No, that's not true. It came out of the Queen. I mean, the speculation is that it came out of the Queen's personal fortune.
Yeah, which came from where, James? I mean, let's be honest.
1066, if you want to really get down to it.
But the thing is, what annoys me is there's a massive disparity between the way Harry's treated and Andrew's treated. If it was the working class person who had done what Andrew has allegedly done, we'd be in prison.
You don't even need to say allegedly. All you need to say is paid off an accuser, given £12 million to an accuser. That's not an allegation. That actually happened.
And they're just, I mean, he gets heckled, when something happens and the person gets arrested. Meghan was shaking hands and people were laughing and making snide comments. Nothing happened. She just has to suck it up. I think it's unfair that Harry isn't allowed to wear his uniform. He should be allowed to wear his uniform. And I think his general treatment, aside from all of that, is unfair. And
well, of course it is.
that
course
called
it's
earlier
unfair.
that said about choice. What kind of a choice is that, to defend your wife? Why should he have a choice where he has to defend his wife or choose royal commitments? Why? Why should that be?
Do you have a favourite example of the treatment that an awful amount of effort has gone into denying? Do you? Because I do. I mean, it's quite hard to pick one, but my personal favourite is when the Duchess of Sussex had some flowers in her wedding bouquet that were exactly the same as some flowers that the Duchess of Cambridge had in hers. And British newspapers reported these flowers in Kate Middleton's bouquet as being beautiful and traditional and, part of a long history of floral relevance or whatever the words were, whereas Meghan was reported with exactly the same flowers, Amar, as potentially poisoning the bridesmaids.
Yeah, I mean that is a good example. My example has been one more recently when she stayed home with her children, and so did the Princess of Wales.
Yes.
And one was applauded for being, a wonderful mother and a caring family member, and the other one, why is she not by her husband's side? I mean, there are loads of examples of the disparity between the treatment of the two of the members, and it really annoys me. And people say it doesn't come to race, but I have to bring it out there, James. It does come to race. It does come to colour. It does come to the fact that certain members of Britain won't bow down to someone of colour, won't shake hands with someone of colour, and it's that disparity.
I think that it would have gone differently if she had been more deferential, if she'd been a sort of, more of a doormat. I don't think that Harry would have fallen in love with her if she'd been a doormat, but I think the idea that neither of them were prepared to button their lips when the bad stuff happened, because the traditional trade-off with the British media is that, you give them this and in return they'll back off on that. They got hung out to dry on that. They were not looked after. They were not protected by the palace or Buckingham or St James's, and that is where the breach came in. That is where the point of no return was reached. So I can imagine a universe in which, despite her ethnicity, she would have retained a popularity in the eyes of the British public. If you want me to go full conspiracy theory on this, I think the real problems began when she got too popular on that last royal tour they undertook, and she was getting the Diana treatment in a way that William's wife never did.
And but when you say about her being a doormat, at what cost?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm not suggesting she should have been. I'm just. Of
things that were out there about her, like she couldn't take a foot right. And yes, the tour she did really, really well, and she would have been amazing. But the press didn't give her that opportunity. It was, one person would say, "Oh, she wore this dress and she looked this and that," and then another one. I mean, you see. The Princess of Wales in something similar, and doesn't she look beautiful and a fashion icon? Like, at what cost would this have occurred? Like, I don't understand what possibly they could have done.
No, well, they're nothing. They go once that breach was reached, once the decision was taken, either consciously or subconsciously, that we're not going to afford the sort of protection. We're not going to call the media attack dogs off. They can fill their boots with this woman. And Harry knows how it works. He's been living in that circus for his entire life. He knows exactly what's happened. A conscious decision is taken, a calculation is made. Well, they can fill their boots with Harry's wife. We're not going to step in. We're not going to protect her. She's not, I don't know, in their views, maybe she wasn't respectful enough to them. I always remember the line about her having to curtsy when she met her husband's grandma. I mean, that is pageantry for you. That's tradition. That's protocol. It's a bit hard to get your head around, isn't it? And she went along with all of it, but I don't think she was prepared to become a sort of a cipher. It's 11 o'clock. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. I like the way The Independent have reported the issue that we were discussing in the last hour. Very, very neatly put. Done a better job than me. The Duke of Sussex has been denied the chance to wear military uniform as he mourns the Queen, even though his disgraced uncle, the Duke of York, will be permitted to do so at the lying-in state vigil. Harry, who saw action on the front line during 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, will be in civilian dress for official events, including the late monarch's state funeral. Only working royals, which Harry and Andrew are not, are being permitted to dress in uniform at 5 ceremonial occasions. Slightly at odds with the Telegraph's claim that Andrew will be allowed to wear ceremonial dress, will be allowed to wear military uniform at one of those 5 ceremonies, but no quibbling over the fact that Harry won't be allowed to at any of them, despite those 2 tours in Afghanistan. Although I have to say that the callers we had with a military background were divided on whether it was right or wrong for him to do so. I didn't change my mind in the course of that hour. I think it's unfair and even perhaps a little spiteful to deny him that right, if he wanted to avail himself of it. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. I'm going to squeeze in Martin, who's in Lakenheath in Suffolk, with a very important addition to this morning's programme, I gather. Martin, what would you like to say?
Oh, good morning, James.
Hello.
I'm a bit of a history nerd. It was just to let you know that the last British monarch that fought in battle was George II in 1743. It was the Battle of Dettingen during the War of the Austrian Succession. And the other thing was, it wasn't Charles I who hid in the oak tree after the Battle of Worcester. It was the man who would be Charles II. It was 1651.
You're absolutely right, yes.
The last battle of the Third Civil War. Charles I had been dead 2 years
You're right,
ago.
no one likes a smart ass, Martin.
Well, your sister asked me lots of questions. I was in a reenactment group, and we reenacted the Battle of Worcester, and also we used to do living history at the Boscobel House, where he hid in the tree.
Which house, forgive me? Sorry, I was talking.
Boscobel
House, that's right.
Boscobel, yeah.
Sealed Knot, is that who you're with?
I was for 20 years.
There
I'm
it is.
a bit too old for it now.
I may have seen you now 20 years. When did you hang up your helmet?
Just for the pandemic.
Oh, okay, no. So when I was about 12, I saw a Sealed Knot reenactment at Edge Hill, I think.
Oh, right, yeah. It's a bit odd, that one, because it's MOD land, so
maybe
it
wasn't Edge Hill. No, maybe it wasn't Edge Hill, but I think it was to commemorate Edge Hill. Maybe it wasn't on the exact. Well, you really know your stuff. And did you do that? This isn't Mystery Hour, so you are actually allowed to look stuff up. But did you have the dates at your fingertips? Did you have?
I am seriously. I'm retired now, and I'm a history buff. I read history every day. I can't remember how the War of the Austrian Succession started, but it was basically Britain, Hanover, and Austria against France, our traditional enemy.
In Germany. Dettingen is in Germany against the French. George II gets an interesting ride from history, doesn't he? Because, I mean, he sort of killed off the Stuarts. Finally, Culloden was on his patch, and in many ways laid the foundations of the Industrial Revolution, but he's not a king that springs readily to mind when you're running through the greatest hits, at least not for me.
He's not. When you talk about Culloden, it's normally Duke of Cumberland who gets the mention.
That's right, yeah, of course, and we won't get into the details of that particularly bloody battle. So you're not far from Sandringham then in Lakenheath, are you?
Well, that's Norfolk, but
I know it is, but it's not far away. You can't get to Norfolk without driving through Lakenheath, or you can't get to North Norfolk without driving through Lakenheath.
About 30 minutes, yeah.
There you go. Look after yourself, Martin. Thank you for the information and indeed the heads up. Charles II hid in the tree, or the man who would be king. Charles II hid in the tree, which reminds me of one opportunity, if you enjoy verbal play like I do, is no one yet has described the new king as the artist formerly known as Prince, but I just did. It is 9 minutes after 11. I think that I think I may have just said the word arse on the radio, for which I apologise. I mean, it's not. It's a permitted word, but I can see that some people may not have liked that. It is 9 minutes after 11. You're listening to... Have I just done the thing where you repeat the word during the apology and make everything worse? Oh, no. I'm very sorry for that as well. It's 9 minutes after 11. Speaking of things that get you into trouble in public, let's have a look now at both events in Scotland yesterday, but also events in London. Now, I want you to know that the gentleman in the clip you're about to hear is actually a barrister, because when I first saw it, and I think it works equally well in it was Fort Royal Hill, I think, in Worcester, where I went to the reenactment near the Commandery. You're absolutely right, Gareth. God, I've got the best listeners in the world. The gentleman in this clip, whose name I will share with you shortly, is actually a lawyer, a barrister, I think, which makes what happened even more remarkable. Have a listen to this.
Why are you not giving me details?
I'm not going to. Why would you ask for my details?
Just so I can check and make sure you can be here.
I'm in my city.
You've already said you've been arrested once.
Sorry?
You've already told me you've been arrested.
No, I haven't.
You said that earlier.
No, I said other people have been arrested.
Okay, well, now we've made that clear. I wanted to make sure you didn't have bail conditions not to be here. So just confirm, you're not going to give me your details.
I was holding up a blank sign. Okay. Why are you asking for my details?
Because you said you're going to write stuff on it that may offend people.
I said I was going to write "Not my king" on a sign, and you asked for my details.
It may offend someone.
Who's that going to offend?
Don't know. Someone may
Not
be
my
offended by
king.
it.
Someone might be
All right.
offended.
Are you going to listen, or are you just going to talk over me?
No,
Is that what you're going to plan to do? Just talk over me continuously?
Go ahead.
No? Thank you. All right.
You heard that correctly, and I confess I did a double, even a triple take. The footage was pointless in many ways. It was just his camera phone was being used to record the audio chiefly, and the pictures consisted largely of a curiously ill-fitting jacket being worn by the police officer concerned. It looked about 8 sizes too small. So it was in Parliament Square. Here's his account of what happened. I just went to Parliament Square and held up a blank piece of paper. An officer came along and asked for my details. He confirmed that if I wrote "Not My King" on it, he would arrest me under the Public Order Act because someone might be offended. A period of quiet mourning for the Queen is fine, but using that period to cement Charles's accession as king and crack down on any dissent to the accession is as disrespectful as it is outrageous. And this, of course, touches upon the conversation we started yesterday, which I think will now continue, because that particular element there is one theory I had that might explain why the old Bill was so keen to close him down. Maybe that blank piece of paper he was having was actually Jacob Rees-Mogg's list of Brexit benefits. Has anybody thought about that? So this could have been injurious to the reputation of the current government. Possibly, although Paul Powlesland described it as a blank piece of paper, possibly it was an official leaked document containing all of the Brexit benefits identified by the former Minister for Brexit Benefits, Jacob Rees-Mogg. I don't know whether you've noticed that they don't have a Minister for Brexit Benefits anymore. That means it's over. That's it. They've identified all the benefits. Spoiler alert, there aren't any. But on we go. Hey-ho. Holding up a blank piece of paper in Parliament Square sees you threatened with arrest. And I don't understand it. Let's clarify a couple of things. One of the conversations we had yesterday in this field involved a woman holding up a piece of paper outside Parliament, I think it was, rather than the palace, as I initially thought, which did say "Not My King," and she was escorted by the police away from the scene of her original protest. As is often the case, more details emerge, and it turns out that had as much to do with vehicular access as it did with anything else. There was certainly no public order involved, as I understand it, and this might well be one of those hours where the story shifts with every call. But that particular example was not as problematic as it originally seemed. The one that troubled me the most was perhaps a protester in Scotland who shouted, "Andrew, you're a sick old man," at Andrew Windsor, forced to step back from royal duties after paying millions in an out-of-court settlement to a woman who'd accused him of rape. It was mourners who yanked this 22-year-old heckler backwards, dragging him to the ground and shoving him out of the dense crowd before he was led away by police officers. Now, we touched yesterday on this issue of arresting people for their own benefit. I'm interested in the technicalities. We took a call from an ex-copper, which I think many of us found quite alarming, not least because the police aren't currently enjoying their most glorious era, are they, in all sorts of areas, whether you think of the Sarah Everard vigil or more recent events. The idea that we would trust the individual judgment of a police officer to decide whether or not your children can be arrested for a breach of the peace, well, it chills my democratic heart, to be honest with you. But equally, if other crowd members did decide that shouting "you're a sick old man" at a man who had to step back from royal duties after paying millions to a woman who'd accused him of rape is something that merits fisticuffs, I'd have thought they were the ones that needed arresting. No? I don't know. He's now been charged with breach of the peace. So that one is, even though Scottish law is slightly different from English law in these matters, that's off our conversational list as well. We've also got another case, also in Scotland, of a woman being charged after being arrested in Edinburgh as she staged a protest during the accession proclamation. That's another breach of the peace accusation, which will be heard at Edinburgh Sheriff Court at a later date. And on it goes. The barrister and climate activist who held up a blank piece of paper in Parliament Square said he'd been threatened with arrest by a police officer under the Public Order Act. He confirmed that if I wrote "Not My King" on it, as you just heard, he would arrest me under the Public Order Act because someone might be offended. And I think we'll focus on that, partly because some of these will be sub judice now, with charges being brought, and partly because it's bizarre, isn't it? I know we're still in that little realm of it matters, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to use this a bit, I think, this week, because I hope it speaks to everybody. It speaks to people who think it matters and people who think it doesn't matter. I'm afraid I am cognitively dissonant on this. It really matters, but it doesn't matter, is my attitude to an awful lot of it. It reminds me of my mum. I told you, didn't I, last week, that she sat me in front of Edward VIII's funeral when I was about 3 months old. And she would tell me this occasionally growing up at times of royal importance, like the royal wedding or the Silver Jubilee. And I thought she was a bit daft, to be honest. I said, so what? You sat me in front of a television programme I wouldn't have understood. But I got it. I got it last week when the Queen passed away. I understood that Mum wanted me to have some sort of connection with the history of my country. And having seen the funeral of Edward VIII, as he briefly was before becoming the Duke of Windsor, gives me a sense of connection. But on the other hand, it doesn't matter at all. It is actually a bit meaningless and a bit silly. So that's what I mean when I say it matters, but it doesn't matter. And you can't really argue with me because I've got all the bases covered when I say that. But this does matter. This really matters. You can't go around arresting people for holding up blank pieces of paper or threatening arrest if you write something on that blank piece of paper. So what matters most here? Is it the not my king? Is it the words? 0345 6060973. Is it the words "not my king" that are the problem? Is it the lack of due deference? 0345 6060973. Is it? I don't know. What is it? Is it in any way defensible that a barrister, well, regardless of whether he's a barrister or not, although he did add, I speak in a certain way, I was dressed in a certain way, and I understood the law, but someone else might have been in a different situation. Normally, you can get into trouble for shouting, but if you have something written that is super factual and which is not abusive, then you would normally think you are protected. It's pure free speech. I think the idea that he could arrest me and that there could be a conviction under the Public Order Act was ludicrous, but interventions like that are having a chilling effect. And this I rather like. This is, I think, a rather British explanation. He says, I didn't hold up the sign in the end because I have to work tomorrow and I couldn't afford to be detained. A lot of other people might simply be chilled into not protesting. Do you find this chilling? 0345 6060973. That's your starting point, all right? Yes or no? Do you find this chilling? A man attracting police attention for holding a blank piece of paper and being warned that if he wrote "not my king" on it, he would face arrest. Do you find this chilling? If not, why not? Because I do at the moment. I did yesterday. I said so. Before this story emerged, other elements of protest and police interaction. But I would like to hear some arguments about why it's not chilling. 0345 6060973. That's not to say, of course, that agreement with me is unwelcome. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. How did it get to 11:19? I feel that was one of my shorter introductions. It is 21 minutes after 11 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Trish in Norwich says, James, perhaps going forward people should just hold up blank signs and that will say it all. It does seem a little bit remarkable, doesn't it, that you could attract police attention for holding up a blank piece of paper in modern Britain. I wonder if similar events have ever occurred anywhere else. But the word used by the lawyer who filmed himself in that situation yesterday is chilling. And I think there are 4 words at the heart of the conversation we're about to have, of which chilling is one of them. The other words are "not my king," which apparently gives a police officer the right to arrest you because it could offend somebody. Discuss. 11:21 is the time. Joanna is in Eastleigh. Joanna, what would you like to say?
It chills me to the bone that this is an attack on our freedom of speech and democracy.
Yes.
That we can't hold a piece of paper up, whatever it says.
I can think of some things you shouldn't. I mean, libel. I mean, basic libel, clear lies, untruths, although that would have seen a lot of the anti-vax marchers locked up, wouldn't it, over the course of the pandemic. But we can all think of something that you shouldn't be able to wave around on a banner in public.
Stating an opinion.
Yeah.
In terms of whether you believe with the monarchy or not.
Yeah.
It's wrong. And I think up until a year ago, probably I was thinking, I've always been a Republican, don't believe in the monarchy. I thought, having Johnson in power, actually I revised that opinion to Who Wants a President Johnson.
Yeah.
But this now...
So you've been tempted down from your Republican platform by the prospect of Boris Johnson being our president, slightly.
Yes.
And now you're pushing back at the sight of this very heavy-handed policing being deployed. Well, it's not Charles's fault that the police are behaving in the way that they're behaving. If it's anybody's fault, it's probably Priti Patel's.
I could accept that, but actually, it's what we stand for as a country. And how can we be a proper democracy as well as having a monarchy where we have to be subjects to?
What would you say to someone who insists that they are not remotely chilled?
That they're not chilled?
Yes.
I wouldn't understand. I wouldn't be able to compute that mentality.
Getting arrested for holding up a piece of blank paper, I'm supremely cool with that. I have no problem at all. At the moment, I can't quite understand that mentality either, but I'm sure someone will enlighten us, Joanna. Thank you.
I'm sure. Thank you.
24 minutes after 11. Nick's in Brentwood. Nick, what would you like to say?
Good morning. I'm not chilled by it at all, because if he was holding up a blank piece of paper and the police officer said, if you write, this is not my king, or you're not my king, how did he know that was going to be written on that piece of paper? This guy, the barrister, must have goaded that police officer into saying, this is what I'm going to say, this is what I'm going to write.
Why is it goading?
Well, what did he say? How did the police officer know what he was going to write then?
Well, he would have told him, but I don't understand why goad is the word.
He told him.
Yes.
No, so he said to the police officer,
what happens if I write? What happens if I write "not my king" on this piece of paper? Because I've seen other people in Britain being arrested for doing that. That's what he would have said. Words to that effect.
Well, we don't know what he did say.
Well, we kind of do, because he's provided a fairly comprehensive account, and you can hear the aftermath of when he said other people have been. Well, hang on, mate. If you're not across the facts, then let me help you out. Other people have been arrested for writing "not my king" on a piece of paper. What would happen to me if I did so here, officer?
He'd be arrested, and rightly so.
For what?
The police.
For what?
The police
Nick?
have got a very difficult job to do. Policing.
All right, mate.
Is the most difficult job in the
Arrested
world.
for what?
Listen.
No. Arrested for what?
Let me finish.
No, of course I won't let you finish. You're just going off on a pre-prepared nonsense.
For potentially causing unrest.
Right. What's the unrest?
The police are trying to keep the situation calm.
So what if someone held up a sign saying "long"?
Doing their job.
If someone held up a sign saying, "Nick, mate, are you ready?"
Yep.
Yeah. What if someone held up a sign saying "Long live the King" at a gathering where there were known to be a lot of Republicans? Would that be an arrestable offence?
No, that wouldn't cause trouble at all.
Well, it would, because all of these people are Republicans.
What about...
No. You have to answer my question, Nick. Should he be arrested because he could offend a lot of people in that crowd?
No, he shouldn't.
Why not? Because there's a lot of offended people there, Nick.
No, we've got to use our common sense.
Right, so you arrest someone for... Hang on, I need to be clear on where your common sense has led you. So here's a group of people who are offended by a sign, and that person holding that sign should be offended. And here's another group of people who may be offended by a sign, but the person holding that sign shouldn't be offended. Just talk me through that brand of common sense.
That group of people who are anti-royalist, and if he was going to hold up a sign saying "Long live the King,"
yes,
they should... Let them be pushed aside. Anti-royalists, they're protected.
No, you can't push them aside because they're offended. We're arresting people for causing offence, Nick. We're arresting people for causing offence. You can't have different laws for different signs.
No, this is very exceptional circumstances.
Okay, it's not, because I've got another story you might like. Tell me how you feel about this one. Russian police. Well, we can stick with this story if you want, but it's not. You're not really.
Let's stick with this one for a minute, because that's what we're talking about.
Okay, then. So
there's very exceptional circumstances.
Well, it's not, because it happened 3 times yesterday, so it's not exceptional.
The Queen didn't die 3 times. That's what I'm saying.
No, we're talking about people holding up a sign saying "Not my king."
Yeah, let them be taken away.
But the person causing offence with a different sign shouldn't be taken away.
What do you think is going to happen to those people? Nothing.
Well, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen to this guy?
Walk on their way.
What do you think is going to happen to this guy?
Which guy?
The guy who got arrested.
What, the barrister?
Well, the guy who would have been arrested if he'd written "not." We can't talk about the people who were actually arrested.
Been arrested. So he didn't get arrested. He didn't get arrested, did he?
No, we know that he didn't get arrested because he didn't write on the piece of paper. He said, I've got work tomorrow and I can't afford to take the time off.
Exactly. But he was going
What do you mean exactly?
No, you...
Go on,
We've
Nick.
got a police force.
Yes.
We've got a police force, and we don't allow them to police. And you're aiding that.
We
You're
don't allow them to
looking up a
police a man.
No.
So hang on, Nick.
No, we don't, because you're on the radio and saying they did wrong.
No.
And you're broadcasting this across the nation.
But they
that
did.
Those police are wrong.
Are you? Don't take this question the wrong way.
You're whipping up the trouble. Not
yeah.
the guy holding the piece of paper. You are.
No, you are.
You're causing more trouble.
No, yes.
You are.
No, you
causing more
are.
Trouble
You
than
are.
that guy
You
with
want
the
people
piece
to
of
be
paper.
arrested for what? Carrying a little sign around. You want people to be arrested for the possession of paper.
I'd arrest you. If I was the police, I'd be arresting you for whipping up trouble, causing trouble in the nation.
And that makes
That's
you a
all
fascist.
I've got to say to you. That's all I've got to say to you.
Where do you stand on freedom of speech, Nick?
No, there should be a few more rules, because it's all leading the wrong way. Everything is.
What should people
We've
be?
got to allow our police.
What
We
should
have
people
to
be
allow our
allowed
police
to say? What should
police.
people who don't believe in a monarchy be allowed to say about it in public?
Not much.
Well, tell me where the parameters
Because
would be under your glorious rule. Under your glorious rule, Nick. Under your glorious rule, someone who doesn't believe in monarchies, who doesn't think that because somebody's ancestor won a war or stole a bunch of money and ended up on a throne, we shouldn't be doing that in the 21st century.
Oh, that's how the monarchy got there. Was it they stole a bunch of money?
Well, if you go back to 1066, mate, they killed the King of England and took his throne. Do you want a history lesson, Nick, or do you want to have a conversation about what you should and shouldn't be allowed to say about the monarchy?
No, I agree. You should be allowed freedom of speech. But let's get this in perspective.
I have, Nick. I've got it in perfect perspective. What should they, under your freedom of speech, under your...
You're whipping it all up into a storm.
No, you are.
The police were just trying to keep the peace.
No, what should you be allowed to say?
They threatened the man. They said,
what should you... I'm going to ask you again. I'm going to be late for the news. I don't want to be late for the news. Keith gets upset.
No, don't be late for the news.
What should you be... What should... If not my king is an arrestable offence, what would be an acceptable comment on a piece of paper?
It's not about what was written on the paper.
It's entirely about what was going to be written on the paper, Nick. So you have to answer the question, what should he have been allowed to write? How would a permissible...
It's not what was about what's written on the paper.
It is, Nick. You can't... It doesn't matter how many times you say things. It never becomes true.
Just doing their job.
Yeah,
so
what would you be allowed to write on the piece of paper?
Long live the king.
But that's going to offend people.
No, but to my mind, it's the Queen's death. Yes. Nobody should be holding up bits of paper saying anything. Be there mourning politely.
So we're going to ban paper.
Polite. Oh, don't be stupid.
You just said nobody should holding up.
You're above this.
No, above what, Nick? You're talking absolute gibberish, man. You need to either answer. You just called for a ban on paper.
People go and get away with it.
Love to the family, Nick.
Every day on the radio and get away with it.
Love to the family, Nick.
Yeah, and you.
It's 11:31. Holly Harris is here with the headlines. 11:34 is the time. If you understood why I wished Nick there in Brentford love to the family at the end, then yeah. If you didn't, then I cannot recommend enough a comedy duo called Exploding Heads and their work on all sorts of platforms and media. But you can find some of their clips on Twitter most easily. And I tell you what, you can thank me later. 25 minutes to 12 is the time. It is, I think, absurd to be told that if you write "Not My King" on a piece of paper and hold it up in the air, you will face arrest. I think it's obviously absurd. I really do. I'm open to explanations of why it isn't, but those explanations will have to include two things. Why holding up a sign saying "Long live the King" at a gathering of Republicans would not also merit arrest, and what is the difference between what happened in London yesterday and what happened in Nizhny Novgorod at the beginning of the current war in Ukraine, when a woman, an elderly woman, was arrested holding a blank sign. I can't add anything to that. She was arrested holding a blank sign in Vladimir Putin's Russia. Perhaps it's just common sense. Terry is in Belfast. Terry, what would you like to say?
Hey, James. I just think it's an issue of bad timing. Today, at the moment, the British people are feeling very hurt, and mourning their Queen. And these protests would be better placed around the time of the coronation. And I don't really understand to what end. Like holding up a sign, one person holding up a sign. It's basically just physical tweeting. You're just letting everybody know how you feel. Not really going to drive any change that way. If you really feel that that has to be done differently.
Well, you can't put a timing on freedom of speech, can you? You can't say you can have freedom of speech, but only at 4:10 on a Thursday. It's either a freedom or it isn't. So I don't think that one holds. The second bit, and I don't think either of us feel this in our bones, but some people are passionately Republican. Some people, and I understand this intellectually, if not emotionally, at this stage in my life. They feel that an awful lot of the injustice and the inequality in this country is a direct consequence of monarchy in particular and aristocracy in general. And the idea that by dint of, a millennium-old tradition built upon essentially, war and battle and pillage, that you and I today are subjects of a king. I think you are allowed to, aren't you? You are allowed to balk at that quite.
Yeah, you are. No, here, look, I'm phoning you I'm just about 5 miles north of the border in Ireland here.
Right.
I wouldn't describe myself in any way as a monarchist, but I respect people's points of view and I will defend
But you don't though. You don't respect people's points of view because you're telling the fellow with the sign to wind his neck in and sit down.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying is, well, that's not my intention.
Okay.
The point I'm trying to make is there's a certain point where we have to be mindful of public safety and the safety of those protesters. It is more, and we've seen that in Edinburgh where the guy got yanked by the throat.
I did, but we're not talking about him. We're talking about someone who was filming his experiences, and equally, but by all means protect me from a baying mob, but don't. How do you protect me by arresting me?
Well, that's the thing. I think the police have went too far, and we have lots of examples of that in the last couple of years. Arresting them's not the answer. That's too heavy-handed. Take him away, have a conversation.
But I'm not going to agree with you on the sign either. Of course he's allowed to hold up a sign in Parliament Square saying, "Not my king." He has to be allowed to do that.
Well, the joy of every democracy is we're allowed to disagree. I think he has the right to do it. I just think it's very, very foolhardy.
I'm not going to argue with you about that. And just on a purely sensibility level, I wouldn't do it, and timing would be part of the reason why I wouldn't do it, even if I shared his views. But remember, he's doing two things there. He's addressing the history of monarchy, but he's also expressing or highlighting profound concerns about the nature of policing in this country at the moment. The idea, come on, mate, you can't get arrested for holding up a piece of paper with the words "Not my king" written on it. What would be next?
Oh, absolutely. Like I say, the police in those instances, but then that's one police officer that we have on video. You're not sure how many other people that has just been come on, mate, put that away, have a chat with yourself, more of a soft touch. I think that's the conversation, actually, that really it should be unfolding here. It's that no one should be passionately defending someone getting arrested for holding a piece of paper. And equally, if a conversation is to be had with somebody who may be exposing themselves to threat or danger by behaving in a certain way, albeit a completely legal way, then there is a role for the police to step in and indeed to seek to avert problems. But, in many ways, I can't help thinking that if someone's going to get lamped for holding up a sign with "Not my king" written on it, it's the person doing the lamping who should be getting arrested, not the lampee, if that's even a word. Terry, thank you. Dan's in Croydon. Dan, what would you like to say?
James, I retired from the Met in December after a lifetime in the Met. And I don't think this has got anything to... Thank you. I don't think this has got anything to do with the Queen or that guy's heartfelt beliefs about the monarchy. What, in my opinion, what this has to do with is a continuing trend to, I think it started in America, to kind of film yourself while you're auditing the police, hopefully attain an adverse reaction, and they'll then post it online for some sort of grandstanding event. It began about 5 or 6 years ago.
I can see why you think that.
It's at velocity speed now.
I know, I get that.
Well,
I think I
I'm
need
right.
to.
And,
no, hang on. I do need to give you a little steer on this guy's background because he does have.
Okay.
He does have a track record of profound concern about implementation of the Public Order Act. He's not doing it for Twitter fame, and he is a barrister, so his relationship with the law and how the law impacts the people is literally his livelihood, as indeed was yours, albeit from a different side of the field, as it were. So he's not some sort of attention, because my experience of it, oddly, was with little Tommy Ten Name's mates, when they'd chase you down the road pointing cameras in your face, trying to get you to get cross and then stick it on YouTube and ask for money. So, I mean, it happens all over the place, but I don't think it applies in this particular case. Also, it would be wrong of me not to remind you that if it wasn't for people filming the police, we wouldn't know anything about how George Floyd was murdered.